Okay. A very good evening, guys. Can you let me know if y'all can hear me and see a screen? Yes. Can you guys? Good. Right. Nice. So today, guys, is our third class for our revision program. So we did two sessions so far. If y'all are on track, there was the unit broken into four focus areas. So in the first class, we worked on topics like micro, macro econ, goods, resources. We worked on that. We did that paper. In our second class, we worked on focus area 2. That is where we worked on scarcity choice opportunity cost. So you all had to submit the paper before the class, and the marked paper, I sent it to you all yesterday. So the marked papers, guys, it's very hard for us to individually send it to each student. So that's why I put it into a Google Drive link and send it on the group so that everyone can download it. Please make sure that you download your relevant paper, and maybe in your phone have a separate folder, or maybe on your laptop have a separate folder saying marked revision papers. So every time a marked paper comes, you download it and save it in your phone or laptop and properly systematically keep it, because those papers that is there in the link will usually get deleted in 1 week. So if you have not yet downloaded your paper and got it, so don't rely on that link. The link gets deleted. So make sure that you do that. You can even take 2 minutes to quickly go and download your paper. You can search your paper. It's alphabetically sorted. You can search your paper and quickly download. If there are any issues with that, your paper is not there, anything like that, you can let me know. But apart from that, everything else should be fine. So today, I think before the class, most of y'all have submitted revision paper number 3. So that was the paper on economic systems. So ideally, why I tell you all to do the paper before the discussion. Certain units, the paper will be done after I teach you the area, but this is unit number 1. Most of y'all already know these concepts. You all know what is a market economy. You all know what is a command economy. So that basic story is not something that you don't know. So that is why you do the paper before the class itself and come. So ideally, what you can do is, maybe now class is on Wednesday. So maybe on Monday or Tuesday, take some time to go through your theory tute, whatever note that you have, maybe my theory class tute if you have it, your school note, any note that you have, just go through those areas and then refresh your memory. And after that, do the paper and submit it by 3 o'clock. So now you all know the schedule. It's the same thing. Every Wednesday, class happens from 4 to 6:30. At 3 o'clock, you need to submit your paper before the class. So good job with the paper. I looked at the top scorers also. You all have done well. The marking also, we did not give a lot of free marks. We weren't very tough with marking because it was the first paper, but we weren't very lenient and giving marks just for the sake of giving also. We just wanted to make sure that your answers get better and better. So that was the first paper that you all even wrote. So good job with that. Answers of those also I have shared in the group yesterday, not yesterday, last week itself. So today's paper also, after we discuss the paper, I will share the answers on the group. From next month onwards, where this becomes a paid class, all of those will be there on the website. So in the group, I think it's a little bit not very organized, like different times I send different things. But once we start unit number 2 and all, it will nicely be ordered on the website. You can easily find it. The recording will be there, the papers will be there, the answers will be there, everything will be there. You'll get your file at the beginning of the month. So all of that will be there. So don't worry about that. Just make sure that you read the messages that come on the group so that you know what is happening around. And also, guys, I sent you all a form to collect your details to make the flyer. So some of you all have actually filled it. Some of you all have not. So I couldn't really make the flyer with the, so I wanted to actually make a top 10 flyer with the pictures, putting your school and all of it, but most of you all have not filled it. So because of that reason, I couldn't, even in the top 10, only around 6 people had it. So there were other people who have not filled it. So please make sure that you all fill that form also. So just In terms of your face also, you don't have to have any fancy pic, just a normal picture. If you don't have a picture alone, from a picture that there is, and just attach a picture. So your name, school, and your picture is what we need to make the flyer. So if you have not yet filled it, please take some time to fill that. So that's something motivating when I share a top 10 flyer. So good job again for the people who were in the top 10. That was very nice answer writing, especially given that it was the first paper. We'll see who the top 10 are in the current one. We'll see how it goes. Theory class recordings, you can drop a text to admin guys directly if you have a issue with that instead of me. Okay. Right. So shall we start and get going? For the ones who did the paper today, how is the paper? Shape, manageable, okay, hard. How is it? The one on economic systems, mostly on market economy. There were a few difficult questions, I think. Something on consumer sovereignty. I think there was one on the invisible hand. But apart from that, I think everything else was very direct, no? Asking about a market economy, command, mixed economy, how they answer the problems. It was things like that. Okay, so we'll discuss and we'll get going. So you all know the structure of the class, Lamai. The first half of the class, I will recap the theory. The second half of the class, we will discuss the paper. So today's part is a little long, but I think we should be able to finish on time. Ideally, class goes until 6:30. If we can finish our areas before that, we'll finish the class before as well. So we'll start now. Let me share the screen and we'll get started. Okay, so I am guessing you can see a screen. Yes. Okay. So this is the area that we will be discussing today. So today is focus area number 3 of unit number 1. That is on economic systems. So remember, my last class, we ended the focus area 2 saying that because of scarcity, every, let's say, country has to answer 3 basic economic problems. That was what to produce, how to produce, and whom to produce. So in order to answer these, Lamai, now the question is, who is going to answer this? Who is going to decide what to produce, how to produce, and whom to produce? So to do that only, Lamai, what did people do? People got together and created something called an economic system. So what is an economic system? An economic system is, we say, a mechanism or the institutional framework built by the people to do what? To answer the basic economic problem. So maybe in your paper, at any place, if they ask, what are the main functions of an economic system? So what are these economic systems created for, Lamai? What are the main functions of it? The main functions of this is to solve those basic economic problems, to answer the problem of what to produce in what quantity, to answer the problem of how the goods are to be produced, to answer whom to produce. That is their main function. That's what an economic system is ideally there for. So then, if you look at this economic system, Lamai, if you take any system, it's a collection of small parts. Now, let's say for science, I think you all would have learned something like the digestive system, or your most favorite system, remember the reproductive system where everyone is there in class. So even in these systems, Lamai, there are small components, no? If you take, let's say, the digestive system, you have the liver, and I don't know, there are around a few components. So just like that, in an economic system also, Lamai, there are components, there are elements. So who and who are there in an economic system? In an economic system, you will have households, you will have the government, you will have business firms, you will have these labor organizations like these trade unions and people. You will have non-governmental organizations like these different charities, different political parties, right? Those, you might have different markets. You have goods market, factor markets, you have incentives, you have a legal structure, there is values, traditions, cultures. So all of these are there inside what? An economic system. These are the what? elements of an economic system. So broadly, what is an economic system, Lamai? An economic system, we say, is the mechanism or an institutional framework created by people to do what? To answer the basic economic problem. Inside this economic system, there are multiple elements. Households are there, firms are there, governments are there, right? Different parties are there. That's the basic story. So we'll start off with Lamai. A part that most of y'all sometimes get it wrong is this. I think this was tested in the paper as well. How to classify economic systems. Now, usually, Lamai, when people ask you to classify economic systems, you all say market economy, command economy, mixed economy. That's what you all say. No? But there is a much more deeper classification than that. That is what I want you all to know. And this area, Lamai, is tested in papers, but they test it very indirectly. So you don't even know that they are testing this area. So you need to know that part into that. No problem. Even if you send the PDF now, that's all right. I usually keep the group open until the class starts. Okay. After I discuss the paper, the group will be closed. You can't submit answers. After I discuss, it doesn't make sense. So listen to this part very carefully. Put this into your head the very first time. Okay. To teach this, I sometimes take an example of classifying business organizations. Can you all tell me, Lamai, what are the criteria that you all use? Most of you all are doing business studies, at least you've done for O-levels. What criteria do you all use to classify a business organization? Based on what criteria? Okay, based on objective, right? So we say profit motive and non-profit motive. Based on the ownership, private sector, public sector. Based on the scale, small, medium, large. Based on the nature, right? So different. There are criteria to classify a business organization. There are criteria based on scale, based on motive, based on ownership. And just like that, Lamai, to classify economic systems also, there are criteria. Business organizations criteria were based on scale, based on ownership, things like that. Just like that, to classify economic systems also, there are three main criteria. What are the three criteria? The first criteria is, Lamai, based on the decision coordination mechanism. Based on the, I'll go into that in detail, don't worry. The second criteria is based on the ownership of resources. Third criteria is based on the incentives used. So in an economic system, Lamai, if you're looking at classifying it based on the first criteria, based on the decision coordination mechanism, remember, every economic system has to make three decisions: what to produce, how to produce, whom to produce. So what mechanism do they use to answer this? If an economic system uses the price mechanism, that is, they produce the most profitable goods, produced in a least cost method. If they do things like that, if they answer the basic economic problems, if they allocate their resources based on price mechanism, we call that economic system a market economic system. So if an economy is using price mechanism, how do we classify it? We call it a market economy. If an economy is using something called planning mechanism, let's say there is a central planning authority like the government, they are making plans and saying, let's produce this, api mehema karamu, we'll do this. If that is how the thing is happening, then if they are using planning mechanism, we then call that a command economic system, or you can also call this a planned economic system. That's the first criteria, based on the decision coordination mechanism. Price mechanism nang market, planning mechanism nang we tell that it's a command economic. That's the first criteria. The second criteria to classify an economic system is, Lamai, based on who owns the resources in that economy. Now, resources are what? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Now, labor you can't own, but think of the others will. So who owns the resources? So if the resources are owned by the private sector again, households, firms. If the private sector is the one owning the resources, we then call that a capitalist economy. So what is a capitalist economy? Someone says, look here, this country is a capitalist economy. What does that mean? That means that country's resources are mainly owned by the private sector. Then if the resources are owned by the government, or we call it the public sector, then Lamai, that is called a socialist economy. So now this first two Lamai, you all have to properly know this. Now, sometimes in a MCQ, they can give you a question saying, I'll just make an MCQ. They are saying, in which of the following economic systems are resources owned by the government? In which of the following economic systems are resources owned by the government? So they are giving you answers. First one, market economy. Second one, planned or command economy. Third one, capitalist economy. Fourth one, socialist economy. Fifth one, let's say they say mixed economy. So in which of these are the resources owned by the government? Which one is the most correct one, Lama? Owned by the government? Do we say planned economy or do we say socialist? Which one's the more correct one? If you are saying ownership of resources, if the question is talking about who owns the resources, then you will say socialist, Lama. That is where that criteria becomes very important. Some of you will say a planned economy also owned by the government. But how we classify an economy, whether it's market or command or planned or command, that is based on the not ownership. That is based on what? The decision coordination mechanism. So maybe in this question, if they ask which economic system uses the planning mechanism, then your answer could have been planned economy or command economy. If they say which economic system has ownership, resources owned by the government, then you have to say socialist. So those small things are where people go wrong. So now, those are the main two criteria. Now, can you all tell me this, Lamai? Now, is a market economy is usually what? Capitalist or socialist? A market economy. That means an economic system that uses price mechanism. I'm asking you, an economic system that uses price mechanism usually has what ownership? Private sector ownership, the government ownership. So usually a market economy is a capitalist economy. That's fine, in a market economy under criteria. We will learn that today. We say private sector owns resources. So usually a market economy, which means an economy that uses price mechanism, usually the resources are owned by the private sector. Does it necessarily have to be like that, Lama? Should a market economy necessarily be capitalist? Should that happen? That was tested in a past paper question as well. The answer is no. Usually, yes, Laman. Most cases, a market economy is usually capitalist. But does it necessarily have to be capitalist? No, Laman. No. Now, this is okay. For example, I'll give you an example. Okay, so you all have these schools. Now in Sri Lanka, I don't know why they do that, but for some reason, you all have schools divided based on ethnicity. Some schools, they only take the Buddhist. Some schools, only the Christians. Some schools, only the Muslims. And you all know, no, sometimes your school also might be something like that. But does it always have to be that? Now, for example, now if you take, let's say, Ananda College as an example in Sri Lanka. So mostly it's they take the Sinhalese crowd is what they take. Now, does that necessarily mean, now usually Ananda College will have the Sinhalese crowd. Does it necessarily mean that everyone at Ananda College is Sinhalese? No, right? Now, same thing with, let's say, Zahira College. Now, I have friends who are non-Muslim who went to Zahira College now. Now, Zahira College usually takes the Muslim boys. But does it necessarily mean that only Muslim boys go to Zion college? Yeah. අන්න ඒ වගේ case එකක් තමයි. So usually a market economy is capitalist. But does it necessarily have to be capitalist? You can have a market economy that is also socialist. That can also happen. That's called a socialist market economy. We'll study it today. And same thing the other way also. Usually a command economy is socialist. That means usually an economy that uses planning mechanism has government ownership of resources. Usually a command economy is also a socialist economy. But necessarily, no. Does a command economy necessarily have to be socialist? No. Usually, yes. Remember the school example if you can't figure it out. Okay? That's the two main criteria. You have to properly know the difference between those two laws. It's tested, so much tested indirectly. They don't test it directly. Because did you all also do the, for last week, did you all do the past papers? Focus area 2 past papers. I sent the answers today only. Did you all do the questions? There weren't much. Would have taken you around 1 hour to do. 1 hour you can finish all the focus area 2 past papers. Where do you think that? That would have been around 1 to 1.5 hours. Yes. Nice. Good. So write as much as possible, right? You do the main paper, write the past paper as well. Past papers, you don't have to wait until I give the answer. It's there in your past paper book, no? So you can find and you can mark it also, but I will also give you the answer. Because sometimes the past paper book answer is not very complete. So I usually take it from the marking scheme only, but if I feel it can get better, then I add a few things on my own. I don't try to deviate fully from the marking scheme. That. So then what is the third criteria to classify an economic system? Is the incentives that is used. Incentive is what makes you do something. So if an economic system is using material incentives, so if people are doing things for their self-benefit, if producers are producing things to earn their own profit, then that is seen in a market economy. If an economic system has coercive incentives, if in the economic system you're doing something because you're forced to do it, you have no other option, no other option, then that is seen in a what? That is seen in a command economic system. That's the criteria. There are also something called moral incentives. Based on moral incentives, you can't classify your economy. Because moral incentives are you do, now material means you do something for your own benefit. Coercive incentive is you're doing something because someone is forcing you. Moral incentives is you're doing something because you feel that's the right thing to do. Sometimes, for example, when you're going by bus, you stand up and give the seat to someone old, no? But that is not because you're getting something out of it. That is not because someone is forcing you to give, no? That is because you feel, "Pow, this fellow, old fellow, let me give the seat." That's moral incentive. So based on that, now you can't classify economic systems, but that's also that. So that's the broad classification of economic systems, which I want you all to properly know. They test this indirectly. You will not even know that they're testing this because they don't give you a very direct question from this area. Is that fine? Shape. That's the whole criteria and the story. Then in our syllabus, we don't go into much depth in this. Now what we do is, we broadly classify them into market, planned, and mixed. And we go into those in detail. So we'll start with the market economy. Moral, you can connect it a little bit traditional as well, but that doesn't mean moral is only in traditional. Even in a market economy, you might have moral incentives. You can't say that. Okay? Now, so then coming into a market economic system. So a market economic system, what is this? Yes. Now, we learned this kind of before. Now you all have, I'm guessing guys, you all have some idea about what a market economy is. I'm not, again, this is a revision class. I'm just recapping the theory quickly so that we can do the paper. I'm not teasing anything from you. So what is a market economy, Lama? We say a market economy is an economic system that answers the basic economic problems or solves the basic economic problems based on price mechanism. Now, see that how you define it also matters, Laman. Now, some of you all say a market economy, when defining, you all say market economy is where private sector owns resources. Now, that is not the correct classification, Laman. Market economy කියන්නේ private sector owning කියන එක නෙවෙයිනේ. Market economy means price mechanism. Private sector owning means capitalist. Now, in your paper, if they ask define a capitalist economy, don't say price mechanism. If they say define capitalist economy, you should say a capitalist economy is an economic system where the private sector owns the resource. Same way, when you're defining market economy, don't say private sector. That's a criteria. That's a characteristic, correct? Our definition, we can give the proper term. A market economy is an economic system that uses the price mechanism. What are the characteristics? So usually I told you in a market economy, the private sector will own the resources. Then in addition to that, there is what? Freedom of choice. You can do what you want, no? No one will come and force you and tell, "Menna meka karanna, you have to buy this good, you have to produce this." No. You can produce whatever you want, you can buy whatever you want, just like you come into this class. No one forced you to come to my class. Government didn't tell you have to go to this fellow's class. You all have so much of other econ classes. You all decided, okay, let's go to this fellow's class and see. So you have the choice to make now. That's an advantage for the consumer. Then there is also what? There is also competition. Now, do you think I am the only econ teacher out here? There are so much more econ teachers out there. Then incentive based on self-interest. Now, do you think that you're coming to this class, Lamai, to help your friend out? Do you think that you're coming here now on a Wednesday, nice rainy day today also after school? Most of you all went to school. After school, you came home by around 2:30. Now you had lunch, you're tired, I know, but you're still sitting in front of your laptop and or phone and you're still sitting here and waiting in this class compared to most other people who are not here. So you think you're doing that for social welfare. You're doing that because it's the right thing to do for the country, or you can go and teach your friend. You're doing this because Lama, you want to pass the exam. And that's not a bad thing. You're doing this because you really want to pass the exam. Why do you think you're submitting your answers by 3 o'clock? You're submitting your answers by 3 o'clock every Wednesday so that you can get your paper mark, so that your answer writing improves, so that you can see where you went wrong to get your feedback for your self-interest. Now, why do you think I am doing a class? Do you think I am doing this because that is good for the society? I want to build economists in the country? No, I'm doing this because that's my way of living. That's where I earn my income. That's how my family survives, how I survive. So people do things like in a market economy. People do things based on their self-interest. And then the operation of price mechanism. We'll talk about price mechanism more in detail. So price mechanism is only we learn in unit number 2. This demand, supply, I say everything is based on the price. And that's the price mechanism story. We'll go into detail. Then we say consumer sovereignty. What is consumer sovereignty? There is one question in your paper as well. Consumer sovereignty and that the consumer is the most important person in the economy. The consumer has the power to decide what he wants. He can't decide everything. He can decide what he wants based on what the consumer wants, or my producers will produce. Now, remember in the theory class, in my theory class, you all know, we don't practice essay questions in my theory class. I teach you all the theory. To understand the theory, we try a few MCQs because we don't have the time to do essay questions. Then most of you all ask me, sir, when are we doing essay questions? Actually, I tell you, all right, in the revision class, we have enough and more papers where we will do essay questions. And now you all are actually doing it. So based on what you all want to know, I produce and give you. And also, I know this time, right after school, this time is not the most convenient time. I've got so many messages from so many students saying, sir, hard, sir, we come late from school. But right now, I don't have a thing. But after my 24 batch has finished, I told you, I will move this class tonight. I will move it so that after school, you have some time to settle down. Then even on Wednesday, even you can do the paper after coming home. So then if I do the class at 7 o'clock, then your paper submission time will be 6 o'clock. So if you can do it before, but at least even on Wednesday, you can come and do. So based on what you want only, I will produce Lama. That's what you call consumer sovereignty. Consumer sovereignty and not really purchasing power. Consumer sovereignty means the consumer has the power to decide what goods and services he wants. Based on what the consumer wants, producers will produce. And finally, we say limited role of the government. Government doesn't really do anything in a market economy. They have very limited role. They're just there for the namesake. So examples like the United States. That's why I put a small cartoon over. That's a market economy. You have to know the characteristics, Lamai, heavily tested in your paper. MCQs almost every year, either market or commando from something, it comes. When you do the past papers, you will realize. Then, what is this price mechanism, Lamai? Now, price mechanism is only this whole demand and supply story. So what we learn in unit number 2, Lamai, unit number 2, wala. Remember, what is the name for unit number 2? Unit number 2 is called market forces. What is this market forces? Demand and supply. That is that price mechanism story. So here they say, here the price mechanism acts as the coordination mechanism of solving the basic economic problems in a market economy. Price mechanism refers to the system where forces of demand and supply determine the prices of commodities and the changes therein. If it's the buyers and sellers who determine the price. Now, for example, think if there is a huge demand for a good, like now you all know a bit of unit number 2, no? What happens to the price for that good, Lama? If so many people want to buy that good, there's a very limited amount of supply. What happens to the price? Based on price mechanism, so many people want to buy it, there is a very limited amount of goods. Price will start to rise, no? Under price mechanism working. What about the opposite? What if there is so much of a good, no one wants to buy that good? Demand is low, supply is very high. Then what happens to price, Laman? Then the price starts to come down. That's the price mechanism working, Laman. So everything in a market economy is based on that price mechanism, is based on demand and supply. Based on demand and supply, price based on the price only, people decide whether they are going to supply, people decide whether they are going to buy. All of it happens there. Now, for example, Lamai, for your revision class, let's say if the price is only 1,000 rupees, I will not do your revision class, Lamai, because to actually print your file, to let's say print all those papers that you got, and even to every week to mark your papers and give, there's a huge amount of cost that is involved for me. So that price plays a very big factor. So that's why at the revision class, I've told you the class fee, if you're only coming to revision, it's 3,000, but you're coming for theory and both, there's a discount. So only if that is justifiable, only if I think I can cover my cost and at least earn something for all the effort that I'm putting, only then I will supply. So if the price is 1,000, I will not supply the class. I will not do a revision class. Same way for you, if I say revision class fees is 10,000, you will say, what nonsense, I won't buy. So that price is a very important thing, Namai. Price plays a very important thing on balancing the demand and supply. Okay. So that's the basic price mechanism story. We'll go into that in the paper also. So there is Lamai under. Now, if they ask you to explain price mechanism, you can talk a little bit about that. You can also talk about the functions of price. What are the functions of price? The first function of price is we call the signaling or the informative function. Price provides signals and informations, Lamai. It provides information. For example, when the price of a good is very high, remember in somewhere around January, February, remember Lamai, a kilo of carrot kilo was around 2,500. Now, why was the carrot kilo 2,500? What signal does it give? The signal that it gives is, look here, there is a shortage of carrot in the market. There's very little carrot in the market. That's why carrot is 2,500. So if you can go and supply more carrot, so it's giving information. It's giving information for the producer saying, look here, carrot kilo it's 2,500. There's probably a shortage of carrot. Therefore, what happens? If you can go and supply. Same way, if the price of a good is very, very low, what information does it give? It tells the producer, look here, don't supply. Let's say a carrot kilo is 50 rupees. That means, there is so much of carrot. That's why the price is low. Don't supply. Stop your supply. So price provides signals. It provides information in order to make decisions. That's the first function of price. Then what's the second function of price? Now, the incentive function. Price motivates you to do things. So when the price of a good is very high, it motivates the producer. Producer is more happy when the carrot kilo is 2,500. He is loving to go and supply. When the price of a good is very low, it provides the incentive to whom? The consumer. So price provides that incentive function. And the third one is the rationing, or we call it the allocative function. So how do you ration or allocate using prices? When now, for example, I remember in my theory class also, I take this example of the World Cup match. Now, if you take a normal cricket match, the ticket price is 500 rupees. Assume your ticket price is 500 rupees. But if it's the World Cup final, the ticket price may be 10,000 rupees. Why is that? Because you only have a limited amount of seats. Normal match, not many people want to watch. Demand is low. But for a World Cup final, demand can be very high. So let's say 100,000, okay, let's say 500,000 people want to watch the match, but there is only a supply of 100,000 seats in the stadium. So how can you allocate, or how can you ration 100,000 seats for 500,000 people who are willing to come and watch the match? Price goes up. That's the rationing function now. Price will now start to rise. So once the price starts to rise, people, not everyone can afford it. So price will keep on rising until the demand is equal to the supply. That's what happens. Now, even if you take now certain concepts, right? You all would have seen there was this the Taylor Swift concert that was going on, right? The whole tour that she was doing. There was the Coldplay concert that was going on. So prices of the tickets are expensive. You take a ticket at 30,000, 40,000, it's at those prices. Why? Because there's so much of people who are willing to watch. If you give the price of a ticket at 1,000 rupees, it again. So that's the rationing function that happens. The PDF of this paper, I think you all have do all of you all have the printed tunes? I do have a few extra printed tunes as well. I printed a certain amount. I'm hoping you all have. I'll have a poll, especially I think the ones who are not in the class are the ones who might not have the tunes. I'll have a poll because if you have filled the registration form, I remember I sent you a form to fill, because otherwise, how do I send you the tunes? A form, you give the address and all. So if you have filled that registration form, your tune should have been sent. You should also answer the phone and collect the tune. Otherwise, tune again. I'll put a poll on the group and see. Just check if you have any friend of yours who are in the group, they don't have the tune. I think I have around another 10, 15 tunes left. There's nothing that I can do with it. I will courier it off if there is no one else who has it. Okay, right. That's the whole price story and the functions of price. Is that okay, Shape? Questions? Done. Then, this part I am not going into very much in detail. There is a past paper question on my YouTube channel as well. You can refer to that. This private property rights. What is this private property rights, Lamai? Private property rights is the right that you have to do whatever you want with your property. For example, your house deed. Your house deed is a document that gives you the private property right. As long as you have your house deed, you can do whatever you want with your house. No one else can come and say this is their house. You have that right. So in a market economy, these private property rights are very important. Why? Because if you don't have private property rights, there won't be a what? This is me in the revision papers. Yeah. So if so the duty is the file and the 11 papers inside. 4 main papers, 4 past paper, this ones, and 3 take home papers, 4, 4, and 3. That's the tunes that you should have for unit number 1. Okay? Now, so if not for these private property rights, no one will produce anything. Now, for example, let's say I am a farmer. I started cultivating. Now, tomorrow, what if someone else comes and says, look here, this is my farmland and take it and go. Now, as long as I have a property right, I am not scared. I can say, look here, this is my one. This is what I can do. This is my property. Look here, the house deed is under my name. If I can prove it, I'm not scared. But let's say if there is no property right, then no one will produce, no? Because everyone is scared someone else might steal their property and go. So if there is no one producing any goods, there won't be trade. there is no exchange, an economy will not work. So if a economy is to properly work, that private property rights, especially in a market, because in a government, in a command economy, lama, it's not very important because government owns everything. But in a market economy, private sector, lama, people like you and me, households, firms, they only own the resources. So there has to be some sort of mechanism to allocate that property right. There has to be someone who says, okay, this is your one, because otherwise production won't happen. That's that private property right story. You would have gone through that in detail in the theory class. There is a past paper as well covering this. You can check my YouTube channel. Today we are doing focus area 3 and discussing revision paper 3. Okay. So now we'll now come into this, the last part of a market economy. In a market economy, now any economic system was created to do what? Every economic system was created to answer the basic economic problems. So that is something that you have to know now. That is what was the first question even in your revision paper. In your A-level paper, you will not get a question like that where you get a table and I have given 9 boxes then in that. That is for your learning only. I put you a question like that. So they can ask you any of that 9. So I put all 9 nicely in a table for you all to write in your A-level paper. They will not give you a 9-mark question to do that. So how does a market economy answer these basic economic problems now? So you have to focus on the keywords also. So how does a market economy answer the basic economic problems? You have to talk about now price mechanism first. You have to say a market economy solves the basic economic problem of what to produce based on price mechanism. What do? They look at the price signals. Remember signaling function. So when deciding what goods to produce, they look at the price signal. They see, these days this price is going up. That means there is a shortage of this. And එක ගිල produce කරමු. These days prices of this are going down. Everyone is supplying that. ඒක වැඩක් නැහැ. Then will not supply that. So they look at the price signals now. Based on price mechanism, they look at the price signals, and after comparing, they see, if I go and produce this, I can earn this much. If I produce this, I can earn this much. So they look at these price signals, and then what do? They produce the most profitable goods and services. That's how they answer the what to produce question. They look at the price signals, which prices are going up these days, which prices are going down. So that gives you information, and then they produce the most profitable goods. Then how does a market economy answer how to produce? Again, price mechanism that has to be there in your answer. So based on price mechanism, now they look at the price signals in the factor market. What is factor market? Where factors of production are bought and sold. So they will see, okay, if I use labor and do this, how much is my cost? Okay, these days labor is product scarce. Labor prices, these people are demanding for very high wages. Labor is might be expensive. They will see, okay, if I buy a machine and do this, how much is my price? So they look at the prices in the factor market. And then they decide and they choose whatever one that reduces their cost and maximizes profit, whether it's labor intensive or capital intensive, whatever method that reduces their cost and maximizes their profit, they choose that method. So minimizes their cost, maximizes their profit. Then how do they decide whom to produce? Whom to produce means what, Laman? Whom to produce means who gets the goods. So in a market economy, they don't care about giving the goods equally to everyone. That is not their concern. How will a market economy distribute the goods? Again, based on price mechanism, they will give it to anyone who can afford it. Any person who has the purchasing power can come and take the goods and go. So if the market economy has produced 100 loaves of bread, if there is one person rich enough to buy all 100, if he is willing to buy, they will give it to him. They don't care whether other people have bread or not. So a market economy, how do they answer whom to produce? Again, based on price mechanism, that price signals, they give it to anyone who has the purchasing power. So you have to know this part now, my product clearly, because they give you questions on this. The advantages and disadvantages of market, I just put it over here. You can, the basics, Lama, you can just have a look and figure that out. I'm not going into very detail since we have a limited amount of time. So that is it with the market economy. I all fine there. Can we move to a command? You need to know the characteristics. You need to know price mechanism. You need to know how they solve. Yes, I'm just recapping what you already know. I'm not teaching any theory. Please don't get me confused. If you're learning this for the very first time, I always tell this is way too fast for you if you're learning this for the first time. That's why we have a theory class. Theory class recordings are also there. If you want to purchase it, or if you were a part of my class, you can't remember, go back to, if you want a very detailed explanation. This is called a small theory recap. Okay. Now, then I will go into a command economy, or we call it a planned economy. What is this planned economy? A planned economy, we say, is an economic system that solves the basic economic problems based on the planning mechanism, or in other words, based on the plans of whom? Based on the plans of the central planning authority. So, what are their characteristics? What is the characteristic of a command or a planned economy? Here, we say public ownership of resources. Then we say using of planned mechanism or the planning mechanism. They act based on social welfare and act to achieve public well-being. Remember, Lama, in a market economy, we said they were what? Self-interest, profit motivated. But here, nah, in a command economy, it's always what's good for the society, social welfare, public well-being. Both of them are kind of similar. That's what their aim is about. You can also, if you want to add more characteristics, you can say high involvement of the government. You can say limited consumer choice or limited consumer sovereignty. And opposite of a market, you can add more points. No problem. Then, how does this command economy Lamai answer the basic economic problems? How do they do that? Now, that is an interesting one, no? So, this is opposite to a market economy. How does a command economy answer what to produce? Remember, market economy based on price mechanism, they produce the most profitable ones. Command economy එහෙම නෙවෙයි ළමයි. How does this command economy answer what to produce? This is more government running the thing and everything. How do they answer? They use the planning mechanism. So using the planning mechanism, you have whom? You have the central planning authority. They will make plans, ළමයි. They will see these are the inputs we have. With this, what are the outputs we can produce? They will do an input-output analysis and see. They will see, we have this much land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. With this, what and what we can produce. So they will do a small input-output analysis and they will see what goods give the highest social welfare, what goods give the highest benefit to the public. Those are the goods that they will actually go and produce. They will produce the goods that provide the greatest social welfare. Then how do they decide how to produce? Now, how to produce is the whether labor intensive or capital intensive. No? Again, planning mechanism. Central planning authority will see, okay, if we use labor and produce this good, what is the benefit to the public? If we use capital and produce this good, what is the benefit to the public? So they will look at labor and capital intensive and they will see which one gives the highest benefit to the public. Now, in a market economy, they looked at what is the most profitable good. But may profit the most, not profitable, least cost method. That's what they looked at. Now, in a command economy, it's not what they are looking. In a command economy, what they are looking at is not the least cost method. Which method gives the highest benefit to the public? That's what their focus is on. This thing. So, for example, let's say during COVID, so many people lost jobs. So, in a situation like that, if the government is doing some production, what would they do? They would use a labor-intensive production technique because then only more people will get jobs. Even that might be expensive. So many people have lost jobs. So many people are falling into poverty and give some jobs. That's what the government might do. That's how they would do on decide the how to produce things. Whatever method that gives the highest benefit to the public. Then how does a command economy answer whom to produce? Whom to produce is who gets the goods, no? A market economy, remember, they gave it to whoever who has purchasing power. So a problem in a market economy, inequality in income distribution. So in a market time, there can be very rich people, very poor people. Rich people might get all the goods. Command economy not like that, Lama. In a command economy, the central planning authority, what they would do, they would try to set the wages of people. They would try to make sure everyone is getting somewhat of an equal wage. They would make sure that all the prices are fairly set. So if Lama, just assume, if all of us in the class right now, if we are earning somewhat of a similar wage, let's say all of us are earning close to 100,000 a month. Some of you all are earning 90,000, some people 120,000, some people 100,000. So if they can set the wages, make sure everyone is earning somewhat of an equal amount, then Lamai, all of us can get an equal share of the goods and services produced. No? That's what they would do, Lamai. A command economy would make sure that all the people get an equal share. They try to make sure there is equity, that people get an equal share of the goods and services. So how to make sure people get equal share? You can't go from house to house and give everyone, this is your loaf of bread, your loaf of bread here, then the bag. How do they do that? In a command economy, government will make sure they set the wages. They set the wages so that everyone gets like a equal. You won't have perfect wage. Everyone won't have the exact same salary. But from the rich people, soon government will charge taxes. For the poor fellows, government will give subsidies. They will educate the fellows. They will help them to get richer. So they will try to somehow make sure everyone gets like an equal income. That way, everyone can get an equal share of the goods and services that is there. That's how they answer that. That's the story of a command economy answering the basic economic problems. Is that okay? Video is glitching, can't hear the audio. I think there's nothing wrong on my end. Because usually if there's something wrong on my end, I get a message saying my connection is slow. Anyone else? Okay, right? My audio and video. Nothing bad. And here can see. Right? Okay. So command one is also done. Then I will now move into, so advantages, disadvantages, I will leave it there. I will share this PDF with you all. No? You all can have a read if you all want to. Product, no. Remember, recently in the recent past papers, you all do some reading on your own as well. The advantages and disadvantages, market, command, and mixed. So these have been questions that they have been asking recently from 2019-20 onwards. There are small questions asking what are the weaknesses of a command economy. Weaknesses mean disadvantages. What are the weaknesses of a market economy? So have some basic points in your mind. Then with that, we'll get into a mixed economic system. Now, what is a mixed economy? Now, here also, when defining this, this is where some of you all go wrong. Now, market economy is an economy that uses price mechanism. Planned economy is an economy that uses planning mechanism. So, mixed economy is a mix of these mechanisms, both working together. That's what you call a mixed economy. So, a mixed economy is an economic system that uses both price and they use both price and the planning mechanism. So both mechanisms are there. You have the private sector using the price mechanism. You have the public or the government using the planning mechanism. So in a mixed economic, how the consumers are there, producers are there, owners of factors of production are there, the government is there, everyone is there. Then in the private sector, they will look at their self-interest. The public sector, the government, they will look at social welfare. So it's a combination of the two that we learned before. Here, both private and public sector owns resources. Then decisions related to resource allocation, I'll make a correction here. I think it's correct in your theory, dude. Based on the mainly price mechanism. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, we are like a mixed economy. Government to thin now, private sector thin now, government uses planning mechanism. They do what's good for the society. Private sector does for their self-interest. They use price mechanism, produce the most profitable goods. They do that. So even though we have a private sector using price mechanism and the government using planning mechanism, which one of this is more dominant? The price mechanism is more dominant. No? Even when you all are going to do something, Lama, you all don't think what is good for the society. You think which one can give you the highest benefit. So it's the price mechanism is more dominant, even though you have both mechanisms operating. Okay. Then Lamai, this is something that I want you all to listen carefully. Something they have been testing recently, but some of y'all are a little confused. Sri Lanka is a mixed economy. Now, mixed economies can be further classified into two. Mixed economies can be further classified into two. What are the two? A social market economy and a socialist market economy. These are not the same. Social market and socialist market are not the same. So understand this properly so that you know the difference. There were questions on the on my WhatsApp also. I told you I will explain it today. So what is a social market economy? So I'm not going to read through the note word by word. A social market economy is very similar to a market economy. What does that mean? Price mechanism, private sector ownership, very similar to a market economy. Social market economy, very similar to a market economy. But the government will intervene to promote social justice, social welfare. There is a very strong state role. State means the government. There is a very strong role of the government to promote social justice. Now, Sri Lanka is a good example for this. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, mainly we use price mechanism like a market economy. Mainly resources are owned by the private sector, more private sector businesses than government businesses, right? Mainly, we are also like a market economy. Price mechanism, private sector ownership, we have. But whenever there is something unfair happening, Lamai, don't you think our government always intervenes? So, very strong state role. So, if you look at Lamai, our government, they provide something called Asvasuma. Earlier, this was the Samurdhi benefit. Now they provide something called Asvasuma Lamai. In Sri Lanka, there is around 2.5 million families. So 2.5 million families can Lamai, per family roughly around 4 people. That means 10 million people. Every month, they get this Asvasuma benefit. I don't think most of you all are even, none of you all might be even getting that Lamai. If you can afford to come to a class like this, most of you all might not be getting. So every month, government gives a certain amount of money. How much is the population of Sri Lanka? 22 million. From the 22 million, I'm telling you, 2.5 million families. 2.5 million families, roughly around 10 million people. So roughly around half of the population are getting Asmasu. So every month, government gives them money because otherwise it's very hard for them to survive. Now, prices are very high. And we'll talk about more in detail, very interesting stuff about poverty and all. Because otherwise, now people don't have money for their daily food. People don't have money to send their children to school. So government gives them, see, very strong state role there. Then what about the retired people? Retired people, how are they going to live? And that's why government has something called pension payments. They have pensions. Then what about the local university students who can't afford to travel and do all of that? For that, the government has a Mahapola scholarship for all the local uni students who are falling below a income level. They give a low Mahapola scholarship. So a very strong state role is there to make sure, Lamai, people are protected, to make sure that unfair, the people who are at a disadvantage, people who are falling down, to make sure that they are protected. And that social justice, the social welfare part is a very important part, Lamai, in a social market economy. So very similar to a market economy. Private sector ownership, price mechanism, that is there in Sri Lanka. Private sector ownership, price mechanism, all of that is there. But what is the distinguishing characteristic? Maybe in an MCQ or essay question, if they ask what's the main characteristic of a social market economy, don't go and say private sector ownership or price mechanism. Say that there is a very strong state role or very strong government role to ensure social welfare, to ensure that social protection is there. That's what a social market economy is about. So people who are unemployed get benefited. People who are disabled, now you all know in Sri Lanka, if you're a disabled person, let's say you have some disease, you don't have a hand, you lost a leg, you're blind, right? If you're a disabled person, my government gives you a certain amount of money. There is a amount of money that you are eligible to get every month. Why is that, Lamai? That's social protection. That is social justice. Because a market economy won't give shit about those people. You think a market economy will care about families who don't have money? No. So just like a market economy, but if anything unfair, anything happens, government is always there to protect the people. So Sri Lanka is a very close example for that. Our government might be corrupt, different things are there, that's a different story. But if you take other good countries as examples, Lamai, countries like Norway, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, Finland, they are good examples for social market economies. And in these countries, Lamai, people would willingly pay taxes because people know that these taxes go for the right cause. People know that these governments use these taxes to do what? They use these taxes to fund the public transportation, to make public education, public healthcare. So people get benefits out of it, Lama. So people are not worried about paying taxes. In some of these countries, Lama, taxes are around 40% of your income. Now, Sri Lanka, it's a high, Lama. But in our country, even though tax is not that high, we don't pay no man. Our fellows always complain. Why? Because we know our government is a very corrupt fellows. Our government wastes money on different so much of things. We'll be like, well, I am working so hard. Why should I give my money to our government who is doing nonsense? But in a proper social market economy, Lamai, because that social protection is a very strong thing, people know they will get benefited. People know even if they lose the job, there is something called unemployment benefit. That's what you call a social market economy. You can read through the note. Then, so that's a mixed economy, Lamai. Just like a market economy, but there is government intervention for social protection, social welfare. Then what is a socialist market economy? Now, socialist market economy, you should understand this properly, Lamai. From that, at the very start of this class, remember I classified economic systems. A socialist is what, Lamai? An economic system that has what? What is a socialist economy? An economic system that resources are owned by whom? Private sector, the public sector. Who owns the resources? Private ownership or public ownership? There is public ownership of resources. So socialist means public ownership of resources. The government owns the resources. Then what does market mean, Laman? What does market mean? What does market mean? Based on that classification, a market economy is an economy that has what? That uses price mechanism. And the definition for socialist market comes. So what is a socialist market, Laman? A socialist market economy. Get from the words, Lamai. Socialist kya? A socialist market economy is where the government owns the resources. They operate through socialism. So socialism means government owns the resources. But even though the government owns the resources, decisions relating to the usage or the resource utilization is made through monad, is made through price mechanism. Example, Lamai, China. If you take a country like China, even I would have told you all this before, in a country like China, even the house that you live is not under your name. Now in Sri Lanka, the house that you live is under your name, your father's name, or grandfather's name, or someone it's their name. House deed. In China, in China, even the house that you live is owned by the government. And then government rents it out to you. I don't know at what price, maybe a very small price they will give. But private sector doesn't own the resources. Even the house you are living is owned by the government in China. So, socialist, government owns the resources. But in China, decisions related to resource allocation are done through price mechanism. So that's what you call a socialist market economy. Government owns the resources. However, decisions relating to the resource allocation is done using price mechanism. That's what socialist market works. Market economy planning mechanism. No, so market economy means price mechanism. I'm I'm guessing you're referring to capitalist economy with planning mechanism. Something like that is not there in the real world. So socialist market is there. Again, that's the story about that. Is that okay? Fine. Socialist shape, questions, problems, issues. Yeah. So go through. Then how does this lie mixed economy? This is the last part for the recap. How does this mixed economy answer the basic economic problems now? I told you, even in a mixed economy, broadly, price mechanism is more dominant. No? Mechanism dekama thiyena, price and planning are both there. But which one is more dominant? Price mechanism is more dominant. So then, how would the mixed economy answer what to produce now? Sri Lanka is a mixed economy. From that also, I told we are more likely a social market. So mainly, how do we answer the what to produce question? How do our firms or whatever, when deciding what to produce, based on price mechanism, they produce the most profitable goods, no? That's what they do, no? They produce the most profitable goods. But haven't you seen, even in Sri Lanka, private sector, price mechanism producing the most profitable goods? But don't you think the government intervenes, Lamai? Certain goods that the private sector doesn't properly provide, government comes and provides those. For example, education. Government knows Lamai. Private sector using price mechanism will charge a very high price and provide education. For those who are going to a private school, Lamai, you all know how much your school fees is now. How much is the school fees now at home? I remember when I was going to school at during A levels at St. Thomas's, I remember one term fee was close to around 50,000. This is back in 2016-17, the term fee. I think now it must be way much more higher than that. Anyone else? How much is your? Must be more, right? Term fee? 186 for the entire years. Okay, for 2 years, that is 60,000-70,000 term fee. That's a lot of money, no? So private sector, they are profit oriented. They don't care about social welfare. But how many people might not be able to afford that? How much of people might not be able to even now? There are people, forget about school fees, don't even have the money to buy students the exercise books. So their government intervenes, Lamai. That's why if you see in Sri Lanka, private sector is providing private education, private healthcare, But for those who can't afford it, what does the government do? Government provides free education, free healthcare. Then private sector won't provide, for example, something like street light. Outside your house, you have a light. From that, my private sector can't produce it and earn a profit. No? So who provides that? Government only provides it. So that's what we say here. Problem of what to produce will be mainly solved using price mechanism with different forms of government intervention. So examples like what now? Government providing education, healthcare, right? Healthcare, even things like street light, government comes and provides. Then how do they answer the how to produce? Again, Lamai, how to produce also mainly using price mechanism. Mainly a mixed economy will produce what in a way that they will reduce their cost. But government will again intervene, Lamai. Now you all would have seen that in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, Lamai, for these factories like MAs, you all know, they produce garments, no clothes. So government has deals with them, Lamai. Government tells the MAs factory, if you can hire 1,000 people, if you can hire 1,000 people and create jobs, I will give you a tax incentive. For the next 5 years, you don't have to pay taxes then. Or I will reduce the amount of tax for you. If other companies are paying 20%, you pay only 10%. So mainly using price mechanism, but the government influences the decision. So maybe Lamai, for a factory like MAS, maybe it might be cheaper for them to produce all their clothes using machines. I don't know, maybe some way. But they will still use labor and produce it because the government is influencing. The government says, Ani, if you give some jobs, if you create 1,000 jobs, Anna, I will reduce your tax. I will give you a subsidy. So mainly using price mechanism, but government intervention. So government will intervene usually to promote labor intensive production, because that is what gives the benefit to the public mostly. So government will even lamai wage controls. Now you all would have seen recently these days, there was so much of talk about this plantation workers' salaries. A plantation worker lamai, their salary before was 1,000 rupees a day. Now 1,000 rupees a day lamai is very hard for you to survive. You can't do much with 1,000 rupees a day. So then Anna, Ranil went and said, look here, minimum wage, I'm going to increase it to 1,700. So government is influencing that. So government has minimum wages, they provide subsidies, even environmental pollution. So if you only let the price mechanism operate, lamai, they will pollute the environment. They won't care about this now. Even now, if you all would have seen, have you all seen? Do you all realize Milo has changed their straw? Did you all see that? It doesn't taste the same anymore now, though, no? The paper straw Milo, have you all tried? The earlier, the one that was with the plastic straw. Now they have a paper straw. No? I know that the straw also, I think it gets so and the taste and all. I don't know. I really don't like it much. But still, why do you think they would have changed their production method, Laman? Probably to make that paper straw, it cost them way more than that small plastic straw. Why would they have done that? Because the government influenced them, Lama. Environmental protection. So how to produce? Again, mainly price mechanism. But there is government push, like the Milo changing their straw. Okay. And then the whom to produce. Whom to produce also mainly using price mechanism. But government will intervene again. Government will intervene for what purpose? To make sure Lama, everyone gets an equal share of income. That's why Lama, in Sri Lanka, you have this Samurdhi benefit. Not Samurdhi is now replaced with the Aswasumu. I told you 2.5 families in Sri Lanka every month are getting a certain amount of money. Why is the government doing that, Lama? Government is doing that so that those fellows also can get certain amount of goods and services that is produced in the country. Otherwise, those people don't have the money to buy anything. To make sure there is equality, to make sure there is fairness, and the government intervenes. How do they intervene? Progressive taxes. Rich people, they charge high taxes. For the poor people, they give transfers. Like that's Aswasum I told you. Then government has price control. Now, for example, something like eggs. Eggs were selling at crazy prices at one point. Government said, look here, maximum price for eggs is 60 rupees. They put a maximum price. Then government provides certain merit goods like education. Some people don't have the money lamai to go to private schools. So under free education. So government makes sure that everyone has access to certain amount of goods and services. That's how the whom to produce is again. So when you're talking about a mixed economy, lamai, your broad thing that you have to highlight is mainly using price mechanism, they will answer the questions, but there is government intervention. Government will involve. So how they involve, you can write a little bit about that as well. So that is the story about a mixed economy. I have added a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages. That is for your reading. You can go through. So that's the theory recap part that I wanted to take around 1 hour. That's focus area 3 recapped in around 1 hour. Total part on economic system. So we have one more focus area left for unit number 1. That is production possibility curves, which we will be focusing on next week. Any questions, Lamai? Anything that I missed on the chat box, maybe when I was explaining? Okay. So if that's it, we'll take a small break and then we'll come back to the paper. So shall we take a break of around 8 minutes? So it's 5:17. Where is my revision paper 3? Revision. So we'll take a break until around what, Lamai? Yes, Denmark and all prices are taxes are very high. Traditional Lamai, a traditional economy is like this Vedas. That's what you call a traditional economy, where it's not a very important thing. A transitional economy is an economy moving from command to market. So they are moving from the planning mechanism to price mechanism. That's what you call a transitional economy. Now, for example, examples like Russia, they're like a transitional. Earlier, like Russia and all were very command economies. They were very that government runs the entire thing. So little by little, they have been moving from that. That's what you call a transitional economy. Property rights story is what I explained briefly. Property rights, because if you don't have property rights now, no one will produce anything. You can go through that part once I upload the records. Okay. If you have further questions, we'll take it after class. So shall we take a break until 5:25, and then we'll come into the paper. You have 6 minutes now. Okay. Take a break and